I never imagined that 4 days of silence would be the moment my entire life began to fracture. At the time, I didn't know it yet. I didn't know that the woman I had built my world around had already stepped outside of it. I only knew that my husband had left for what he casually called a guy's trip, and then vanished as if we didn't exist. It started quietly, too quietly. Thursday morning, he kissed me goodbye while I was tying our 6-year-old daughter's shoelaces. He smelled like his usual cologne, smiled like everything was normal, and promised he'd text when he landed. I remember watching him walk out the door, thinking nothing of it. 7 years of marriage does that to you. It trains your mind to trust the routine. By Thursday afternoon, there was still no text. By evening, my messages sat unread. By night, every call went straight to voicemail. I told myself the same lies every loyal spouse tells themselves. His phone must be dead. He's busy. He's having fun. He'll call tomorrow. I didn't want to be the anxious wife. I didn't want to be dramatic. I wanted to be calm, mature, understanding. Friday passed. Saturday passed. Sunday morning came, and there was still nothing. No calls, no texts, no social media posts. My husband posted everything: food, airports, sunsets, stupid jokes with friends. This time there was nothing, just silence so loud it pressed against my chest. Then I did something that changed everything. I called one of the friends he said he was traveling with. The line rang twice before she answered, sounding genuinely confused when I asked how the trip was going. She told me she hadn't seen my husband in months. She wasn't on any trip. She hadn't planned one. She didn't even know what I was talking about. That was the moment my stomach dropped. That was the moment fear stopped feeling hypothetical. I spent that Sunday pretending everything was fine for our daughter. I smiled at the park. I laughed over ice cream. I sat through a movie while my thoughts spiraled into places I was terrified to name. Was he hurt? Was he lying in a ditch somewhere? Or was he somewhere he didn't want me to know about? When he finally walked through the door Sunday evening, tanned, relaxed, sunglasses still on like he was shielding himself from something, he asked me how my weekend was. That was when I realized my marriage wasn't cracking. It had already broken. And I just didn't know how deep the damage went yet. Before everything collapsed, I would have told you I was lucky. Not in a flashy, storybook way, but in the quiet, steady sense that matters more as you grow older. I was 34 years old, married for 7 years, with a 6-year-old daughter who thought I hung the moon. I worked hard. I loved deeply. I believed I was building something real. I met my husband in my mid-20s, at a time when neither of us was particularly impressive yet. He was ambitious, a little guarded, the kind of man who listened more than he talked. I was driven, organized, and hopeful in a way only someone who hasn't been hurt yet can be. We met through mutual friends, one of those casual introductions that didn't feel important in the moment, but somehow rewrote my entire future. We dated for 2 years before getting married. 2 solid, uneventful years. No dramatic breakups, no cheating rumors, no toxic cycles. We argued about normal things: money, schedules, whose turn it was to drive. But we always came back to each other. When he proposed, it wasn't extravagant. Just the two of us, a quiet evening, a simple ring he'd clearly put thought into. I cried. I said yes without hesitation. I never once wondered if I should wait. Our early marriage was busy, but happy. We both worked full-time. I was in finance, long hours, spreadsheets, deadlines. He worked in marketing, creative meetings, campaigns, networking events. We talked about our days over dinner. We complained about coworkers. We made plans. When I got pregnant, he cried harder than I did. When our daughter was born, I remember watching him hold her and thinking, this is it. This is the man I chose. This is my family. Life settled into a rhythm. School drop-offs, work, soccer practice, weekends at the park. We weren't wildly romantic anymore, but we were comfortable, stable. I thought that was what love matured into. Comfort felt like success. Looking back now, I can see the small things I ignored. The way he started guarding his phone more closely. The way his work events became more frequent and more vague. The subtle impatience when I asked questions. Nothing dramatic enough to accuse, just enough to make me second-guess my instincts. His family liked me, or at least I thought they did. His mother was polite but distant, the kind of woman who believed no one would ever be good enough for her son. His sister was friendly on the surface, but never warm. I learned early not to expect support from that side. If there was tension, it would be mine to manage. Still, I believed in us. I believed that long marriages weren't supposed to feel exciting all the time. I believed that loyalty mattered more than butterflies. I believed that showing up every day was love. 3 weeks before everything unraveled, he told me he was going on a guy's trip with friends from college, something they supposedly did every year. I vaguely remembered one trip years ago. I didn't question it. I trusted him. Why wouldn't I? We shared a home, a child, a life. I didn't know then that trust can make you blind. I didn't know that comfort can hide distance. And I didn't know that the man I thought I knew had already started living a separate life. The truth is, the shift didn't happen overnight. It crept in slowly, disguised as normal stress, normal distance, normal adulthood. If you had asked me back then whether something was wrong in my marriage, I would have hesitated before answering. That hesitation should have been my warning. He became harder to reach during the day. Texts that used to get replies within minutes now sat unanswered for hours. When I mentioned it, he brushed it off easily. Meetings ran long. Clients were demanding. Deadlines didn't care about family schedules. I accepted those explanations because I wanted to believe them. I told myself this was what supporting your partner looked like. At home, he was present but not engaged. He listened with half an ear when I talked about work. He smiled at our daughter, helped with homework, tucked her into bed, but there was a distance behind his eyes, like he was physically there while his thoughts were somewhere else. When I reached for him in small, familiar ways, a hand on his arm, a kiss on his cheek, he didn't pull away, but he didn't lean in either. His phone became an extension of his body, always face down, always within reach. If it buzzed, he checked it immediately. If I glanced at it, even absent-mindedly, he would subtly shift it closer to himself. When I teased him about it once, he laughed and said I was paranoid. I laughed too, embarrassed for even thinking it. There were other things, work events that didn't add up, dinners that ran late but produced no stories, a conference he talked about endlessly beforehand, then barely mentioned after. When I asked who he went with or who he met, his answers were vague. People from the industry. The usual crowd. I didn't press because I didn't want to sound insecure. His family started acting differently too. His mother made pointed comments about how hard he worked, how stressful his job was, how much pressure he carried. Always said in front of me, as if reminding me that if something wasn't right, it was probably because I wasn't making his life easy enough. I absorbed those comments quietly, like I always had. There were nights when I lay awake beside him, listening to his breathing, wondering when we stopped talking about dreams and started only discussing logistics, school schedules, bills, grocery lists. I told myself this was marriage, that passion fades and responsibility takes its place. That stability was worth the trade. The guy's trip announcement should have triggered something in me. Instead, I barely reacted. He mentioned it casually over dinner, said it was overdue, said he needed a break. I nodded, told him to have fun. I even helped him pack the night before he left, folded his clothes, checked the weather, reminded him to send pictures for our daughter. Thursday morning, he kissed me goodbye like always. Not rushed, not cold, just familiar. That familiarity lulled me into believing everything was fine. That whatever distance existed was temporary. That we'd reconnect when he came home rested and refreshed. The silence that followed didn't feel alarming at first. It felt unusual, but not terrifying. I rationalized every unanswered message. I defended him to myself. Even by Sunday morning, when the quiet stretched unbearably thin, part of me still clung to the idea that there was a harmless explanation. Calling his friend wasn't an accusation. It was reassurance. I needed to hear that he was safe, that he was exactly where he said he was. When she told me she wasn't on any trip, my mind raced ahead of my heart. I tried to explain it away. Maybe he traveled with different friends. Maybe plans changed. Maybe I misunderstood. But the air in my chest felt heavier after that call. Every memory from the past few months replayed itself with a different tone. Every dismissed instinct came back sharper, louder. It was like my body had known before my mind was ready to accept it. By the time he walked through the door Sunday evening, something inside me had already shifted. I just didn't know yet that this was only the beginning. that the small cracks I'd ignored were about to split wide open. When he walked through the front door Sunday evening, it didn't feel like a reunion. It felt like an interruption. I was sitting on the couch, our daughter's cartoon playing softly in the background, when the door opened around 7 o'clock. He stepped inside, looking rested in a way that didn't match 4 days of chaos in my chest. His skin was slightly tanned, his posture loose. He was wearing sunglasses indoors, like he was still somewhere else. "Hey," he said casually, setting his bag down in the entryway as if nothing had happened. "How was your weekend?" For a second, I just stared at him. I couldn't reconcile the man in front of me with the silence I had lived in for 4 days. Before I could speak, our daughter ran toward him, wrapping her arms around his legs. He bent down, hugged her, asked about school, about her movie night with me, about the ice cream flavor she chose. He sounded like a perfectly normal father. Watching them together made my chest ache in a way I didn't have words for. After she went to her room to play, the house grew quiet again. I stood up slowly, my heart pounding harder with every step toward him. "Where were you?" I asked. "You said you were on a guy's trip. You didn't answer your phone for 4 days." He shrugged, pulling his phone out and scrolling through it like he was catching up on notifications. "I needed a break from everything, including my phone." "A break?" I said, my voice tight. "You didn't think to tell me you were alive?" "You're being dramatic," he replied without looking up. I was fine. I told him I'd called one of the friends he said was on the trip. I watched his face carefully as I spoke. There was no panic, no surprise, just a calm that felt rehearsed. "You must have called the wrong person," he said easily. "Different friend." "So who did you go with?" I asked. He looked up then, his expression cool in a way I'd never seen before. "Does it matter?" "Yes," I said. "It matters. Your wife and daughter didn't hear from you for 4 days." He set his phone down on the counter and looked at me fully now. His eyes were flat, detached. "Stop acting like I'm accountable to you. I'm allowed to have my own life." The words hit me harder than I expected. Accountable to me, as if I were some outsider demanding explanations, not the woman who shared his bed and raised his child with him. "You're my husband," I said quietly. "We have a daughter. You disappeared." "I didn't disappear," he said. "I went on vacation and I'm back now. Can we please not do this?" Something in his tone told me the conversation was over, that if I pushed, I'd only make things worse. I felt small in that moment, uncertain, like I was standing on unstable ground, afraid of triggering an earthquake. "Of course," I said softly. The relief on his face was immediate. He picked up his bag and headed upstairs to unpack, leaving me standing there with questions burning holes through my chest. I sat back down on the couch, my mind racing, every instinct screaming that something was very, very wrong. That night, after our daughter was asleep, I did something I never thought I would do. While he was in the shower, I picked up his phone. My hands were shaking as I unlocked it. I hated myself even as I did it, but I hated not knowing more. Most of the messages looked normal. Work conversations, family chats, nothing incriminating at first glance. Then I saw a contact saved under a generic name. The messages were vague but unsettling. "Can't wait for next weekend. This has been amazing. We need to be more careful." The last message, sent Sunday morning, read, "Got home safe. Talk soon." I took screenshots of everything. Then I noticed something else. His location sharing was turned off. We had always shared locations for safety. Always. Now it was disabled. I put his phone back exactly where I found it and went to bed. He climbed in beside me later, falling asleep quickly. I lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to his breathing, feeling like I was sleeping next to a stranger. The next morning, I called a friend who worked in telecom. I didn't give details. I didn't need to. He told me that as the primary account holder, I could access call logs, text records, data usage, even location pings from cell towers. I spent my lunch break pulling everything from the past month. Calls to an unknown number, hundreds of texts, location data showing his phone nowhere near the place he claimed to be. That evening, I checked our credit card statements. There it was, a hotel reservation, not a resort, a boutique hotel downtown, 2 hours from home. Room service for 2. By the time I printed everything, my hands were steady. My heart was not. I knew then that this wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't insecurity. This was betrayal unfolding in black ink and timestamps. And I was done pretending otherwise. I didn't confront him immediately, not because I was afraid, but because I needed to understand what I was feeling before I let him see it. Shock doesn't arrive screaming. It arrives quietly, numbing your hands, slowing your thoughts, making you question whether you're overreacting, even while evidence sits in your purse like a loaded weapon. For an entire day, I functioned on autopilot. I went to work. I answered emails. I smiled at coworkers. I picked our daughter up from school and listened to her chatter about spelling tests and playground drama. Inside, I felt hollow, like someone had scooped out the center of my chest and left a cold echo behind. That night, after our daughter was asleep, I asked him to sit down at the kitchen table. He looked irritated, like I was interrupting something unimportant but entertaining on his phone. "We need to talk," I said. "About what?" he asked, already defensive. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse. I simply slid the stack of papers across the table. Phone records on top. Credit card statement underneath. I watched his face carefully as he flipped through them. Confusion came first, then recognition, then panic. "What is this?" he asked, his hands starting to shake. "Our phone records," I replied calmly. "Every call and text you made last weekend, including the ones to the number you didn't save under a real name." "You went through my records?" His voice rose. "That's insane." "I'm the account holder," I said. "Keep reading." When he saw the hotel charge, the color drained from his face. He didn't deny it. He didn't even try. "Who is she?" I asked. "It's not what you think," he said quickly. "Then tell me what it is." He stood up and started pacing, running his hands through his hair. He said he needed space. He said he was confused. He said he wasn't happy. He said things I'd never heard from him before, things that felt rehearsed, like lines he'd practiced in private. "She's from work," he finally admitted. "We've been working on a project together. We became friends." "Friends don't take secret trips to hotels," I said. He insisted nothing physical happened, that they just talked, that they needed time to figure things out. That sentence shattered something inside me. "Figure things out?" I whispered. "We have a daughter, we have a life, and you're out there shopping for alternatives?" He didn't answer right away. That silence was louder than any confession. Every delayed response felt like another blade sliding between my ribs. For over an hour, he tried to justify himself. He said he felt trapped, that we'd become roommates, that this woman listened to him in ways I apparently hadn't. He said she made him feel alive again. When I asked if he kissed her, he hesitated too long before saying no. When I asked if he loved her, he said he didn't know. By the time the clock hit 11, I was exhausted. Not angry, just emptied. "I need space," I said. "Where am I supposed to go?" he asked. "I don't care," I replied. "A hotel, your sister's. Back to her, for all I care." He cried then, said he didn't want to leave our daughter. I told him he should have thought about that before checking into a hotel with another woman. He slept in the guest room that night. I didn't sleep at all. The next morning, we performed normalcy for our daughter. Breakfast, backpacks, smiles. The second she walked out the door, the masks dropped. "I'm going to stay with my sister for a few days," he said. "Fine," I replied. "I'm calling a divorce lawyer." The word divorce turned his face white. He said I was overreacting. I told him he had already reacted when he chose someone else over his family. When the door closed behind him, I stood in the kitchen staring at the printed records still spread across the table. Proof of a betrayal I never thought I'd have to face. Proof that love doesn't always protect you from deception. That was the moment I realized this wasn't about saving a marriage anymore. It was about protecting myself and my child from a man I no longer recognized. Once he left the house, the silence felt different, heavier, more permanent. It wasn't the quiet of a partner being away on a trip. It was the quiet of something broken sitting between walls that had witnessed too much pretending. I cleaned the kitchen slowly that morning, wiping the same counter twice, not because it was dirty, but because my hands needed something to do. That afternoon, I called a lawyer. My voice sounded steadier than I felt as I explained everything. The trip, the lies, the phone records, the hotel. The lawyer didn't interrupt. When I finished, he told me I had a strong case, especially with documentation and a child involved. He said we needed to move carefully, strategically. That word stuck with me. This wasn't just emotional anymore. This was about protection. I also called his sister, the one he claimed he was staying with. She answered quickly, sounding concerned. When I asked if he was there, she hesitated for a fraction of a second before saying yes, that he'd arrived about an hour earlier and was upset. I told her everything. The silence on the other end of the line told me she hadn't known. When she finally spoke, she apologized. To me, not to him. That mattered more than she probably realized. Word traveled faster than I expected. His mother called me that evening, not to ask how I was doing, but to say marriages go through phases, that men get confused, that I shouldn't blow up my daughter's life over a mistake. I listened quietly, then told her this wasn't a mistake. It was a series of choices. She didn't like that answer. Friends started reaching out, some careful, some invasive, some already taking sides. A few implied that maybe I hadn't been attentive enough, that maybe this wouldn't have happened if I'd tried harder. Each comment added weight to an already crushing situation. I stopped answering messages. I didn't owe anyone an explanation. He texted me on Friday afternoon. "Can we talk? I owe you the truth." I waited 3 hours before responding, not to punish him, to remind myself that I was allowed to control the pace now. We agreed to meet Saturday morning at a coffee shop on Main Street, a public place, neutral ground. When I arrived early and sat in the back, my coffee went untouched. I wasn't nervous. I was guarded. He walked in late, looking smaller somehow. No confidence, no charm, just exhaustion. He sat across from me and thanked me for meeting him. I didn't respond. "You said you owed me an explanation," I said. "So explain." He told me everything, or at least what he was willing to admit. He met her at a work conference months ago. Texts turned into calls. Calls turned into lunches. Lunches turned into planning a weekend away. He said it felt exciting, new, like an escape from responsibility. He swore they didn't sleep together, admitted they kissed, said he felt terrible immediately, said that was why he came home early. Listening to him speak felt surreal, like watching someone describe a movie I never agreed to star in. I didn't cry, I didn't yell, I just listened and filed every word away. When he finished, he asked if there was any way to fix this, asked if I still loved him. "I love the man I thought you were," I said. "I don't know who you are anymore." We talked for 2 hours, about counseling, about boundaries, about our daughter. I told him if he contacted her again, even once, I would file for divorce without hesitation. He agreed. He moved back home, but into the guest room. Transparency replaced trust. Schedules, phone access, updates, none of it made me feel safe. The escalation wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic. It was slow and suffocating. Every day felt like walking on glass. Our daughter was happier with him home, which made everything worse. I smiled for her. I broke privately. I could feel myself changing, hardening in places I didn't want to. Strength doesn't always arrive triumphantly. Sometimes it creeps in quietly, born from exhaustion. And I knew, deep down, that something inside me was approaching its breaking point. The lowest point didn't come during a fight. It didn't come when I read the phone records or heard his confession. It came in the quiet moments no one else saw. The moments when the house was asleep and I was alone with my thoughts. He moved back into the house, but not back into my life. He slept in the guest room. We spoke in careful, neutral tones, logistics only, school schedules, grocery lists, therapy appointments. To anyone watching from the outside, it probably looked like we were handling things maturely. Inside, I was unraveling. Every sound made my body tense. The buzz of his phone from across the room felt like a threat. The click of a door closing made my heart race. I hated the person I was becoming. Suspicious, hyper-aware, exhausted. I hated that love had turned into vigilance. At night, I lay awake replaying everything. Every conversation from the past year, every moment I'd brushed off discomfort because I didn't want to be that wife. I wondered when exactly I lost him, or if I ever truly had him the way I thought I did. The questions circled endlessly, offering no answers, only blame. I blamed myself in ways I didn't admit out loud. Maybe I worked too much. Maybe I stopped trying. Maybe I didn't listen closely enough. These thoughts crept in quietly, poisoning my sense of worth. I knew logically that his choices were his responsibility. Emotionally, logic didn't stand a chance. One evening, after our daughter was asleep, I walked into the bathroom and locked the door. I sat on the floor with my back against the tub, staring at nothing. My chest felt tight. Breathing felt like effort. I pressed my palm against my sternum, trying to calm my heartbeat, but it only reminded me how fragile I felt. I thought about leaving, packing a bag, taking my daughter and disappearing for a while. I thought about staying and enduring this half-life for her sake. Both options felt unbearable. Every path forward seemed to cost me something I wasn't sure I could afford to lose. He tried, in his own way. He apologized often. He offered reassurance. He asked how I was feeling, but every word felt too late. Trust, once broken, doesn't respond to effort the way love does. It resists, it questions, it doubts. The darkest moment came unexpectedly. I found myself standing in my office late one night, staring at the folder where I kept the phone records and credit card statements. Proof, insurance, a way out. My hands hovered over it, and I realized I was waiting. Waiting for him to give me a reason to leave. Waiting for permission to stop trying. That realization terrified me. I didn't recognize myself anymore. I was no longer fighting for my marriage. I was bracing for its end. And that meant I was already grieving something that hadn't officially died yet. I sat there in the dark, listening to the hum of the house, feeling more alone than I ever had in my life. Not because I didn't have people around me, but because the person I trusted most had become the one I had to guard myself against. That was the moment I hit bottom. Not with anger, not with drama, but with a quiet, crushing understanding. Something fundamental had changed, and no amount of effort could make it go back to what it was. The turning point didn't arrive with shouting or slammed doors. It came quietly, the way clarity often does when you're too tired to keep lying to yourself. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon, in a moment that looked ordinary from the outside, but shifted something permanent inside me. I was sitting in my car outside our daughter's school, waiting for dismissal. Parents stood in small clusters, scrolling on their phones, chatting about homework and weekend plans. I watched them through the windshield and felt strangely disconnected, like I was observing a life I no longer belonged to. That was when my phone buzzed. It was his sister. She didn't text often. When she did, it was usually polite, brief, neutral. This time, she asked if we could talk. Her tone felt different, heavier. I told her I was outside the school and could call in a few minutes. When I did, she didn't waste time. "I need to tell you something," she said, "and I don't know how to say it without hurting you, but you deserve the truth." I sat there gripping the steering wheel, already bracing myself. She told me she'd spoken to him the night before. Really spoken to him. Not the version of events he'd been feeding everyone else. He admitted more than he'd told me. Not more actions, more intention. He hadn't gone on that trip confused. He hadn't gone to figure things out. He had gone fully prepared to leave our marriage behind if things with that woman felt right. "He told me he thought he was done," she said quietly. "He just didn't know how to say it out loud yet." The words landed with a strange sense of calm. No panic, no shock, just confirmation. After I hung up, I didn't cry. I sat there watching children pour out of the school doors, scanning the crowd for familiar faces, and something inside me settled. For weeks I had been stuck in uncertainty, trying to decide whether to fight harder or let go. Now I understood something crucial. I wasn't standing in the middle of a mess. I was standing at the end of a choice he had already made. That evening, after our daughter was asleep, I asked him to sit down with me again. He looked wary, like he already sensed something had changed. "I spoke to your sister today," I said. He didn't ask what she said. He didn't deny anything. His silence told me everything. "I need you to listen," I continued, my voice steady in a way that surprised even me. "I've spent weeks trying to understand what I did wrong, trying to fix something you already stepped away from. I'm done doing that." He tried to interrupt. I raised my hand. "This isn't a threat," I said. "It's a boundary. You didn't just make a mistake, you made a decision to explore life without me. And whether or not you followed through physically doesn't change that." For the first time since this began, I wasn't asking for answers. I wasn't seeking reassurance. I was stating reality. "I won't live in a marriage where I'm waiting for you to decide if I'm enough," I told him. "I won't model that for our daughter." He looked shaken. He apologized again, said he was scared, said he didn't want to lose his family. But fear is not commitment, and I finally understood that loving someone doesn't mean accepting uncertainty as a permanent condition. That night, I moved the folder out of my office and into a place I could reach easily. Not as a threat, as protection. I emailed my lawyer the next morning and asked him to prepare paperwork, not because I was filing immediately, because I needed my power back. The turning point wasn't about leaving or staying. It was about choosing myself without guilt, about recognizing that strength doesn't always look like endurance. Sometimes strength looks like clarity. Once I stopped chasing clarity, the consequences began to unfold on their own. I didn't have to expose him. I didn't have to announce anything publicly. The truth has a way of surfacing when people stop working so hard to protect a lie. He started unraveling first. At home, his confidence disappeared. He hovered awkwardly, unsure of where he stood, unsure of what to say. The man who once spoke with certainty now second-guessed every sentence. When I told him I had spoken to a lawyer, not as a threat, but as preparation, something in him cracked. He realized I was no longer afraid of losing him, and that terrified him. His family changed next. His sister became distant with him, polite but cold. She checked on me instead. Quiet messages asking how I was holding up. His mother, who had once minimized everything, stopped calling altogether. I later learned she confronted him privately, furious not because he cheated, but because he had embarrassed the family. That irony didn't escape me. At work, things shifted too. He became distracted, missed deadlines, made careless mistakes. The woman he'd risked everything for didn't step in to save him. She didn't offer comfort or commitment. When things became complicated, she pulled back. She had her own life, her own consequences she wasn't willing to face. I watched all of this from a distance I didn't know I was capable of maintaining. I didn't gloat. I didn't confront her. I didn't contact him outside of what was necessary for our daughter. Detachment, I learned, is far more unsettling than anger. Eventually, he tried to bargain. He promised change, therapy, transparency. He spoke about growth and accountability, like he'd memorized the language. But the urgency in his voice wasn't love, it was loss of control. He was grieving the version of me who would have fought endlessly to keep him. The hardest part wasn't watching his life destabilize. It was watching our daughter navigate the tension she didn't understand. I made sure she never saw the fractures. I shielded her from conversations she didn't need to hear. I reminded her constantly that none of this was her fault, that both her parents loved her, that her world was still safe. When I finally told him I needed space, real space, he didn't argue. He packed a bag quietly and left without dramatics. No slammed doors, no tears, just a long pause at the doorway, like he was waiting for me to stop him. I didn't. The house felt lighter after that. Not happier, but calmer. I slept better. I breathed easier. The constant vigilance lifted. I realized how much energy I'd spent monitoring his behavior instead of living my life. The fallout wasn't explosive. It was slow, inevitable, and entirely of his making. By the time he realized what he'd lost, I had already stepped into a version of myself that no longer needed his validation. I didn't walk away from my marriage with triumph. I walked away with clarity, and sometimes clarity is the most painful gift of all. Life didn't magically become easier after he moved out. I still had mornings where I woke up reaching for a partner who wasn't there. I still had moments when the weight of single parenting pressed down on my chest. Healing isn't linear. It doesn't follow a schedule. It arrives in fragments. Quiet mornings, deeper breaths, nights where sleep comes without fear. What changed was my relationship with myself. I stopped questioning my instincts. I stopped apologizing for expecting honesty. I stopped measuring my worth by someone else's ability to choose me. For the first time in years, I trusted my own voice again. We continued counseling, focused on co-parenting rather than reconciliation. He respected the boundaries I set. Or maybe he finally understood that crossing them would cost him everything. Our daughter adjusted better than I expected. Children don't need perfect families. They need emotionally safe ones. I made that my priority. I kept the folder, not because I wanted revenge, not because I planned to use it, but because it represented something important. Evidence that I wasn't imagining things. Proof that my reality mattered, that I wasn't crazy for asking questions, that love does not require blindness. If there is one lesson I hope stays with anyone hearing my story, it's this. Loyalty is not passive. Commitment is not silence. And love that demands you shrink, doubt yourself, or wait in uncertainty is not love worth sacrificing your dignity for. You can forgive someone and still walk away. You can love someone and still choose yourself. And you can rebuild a life even when the foundation you trusted collapses beneath you. I don't know what the future holds. I don't know if I'll ever trust the same way again. But I do know this. I will never ignore my instincts to preserve someone else's comfort. And I will never teach my daughter that love means enduring betrayal quietly. Some endings don't come with closure. They come with self-respect. And that, I've learned, is a beginning of its own.